this is what I mean about when they reincarnate or when they come back. You don't need to look for them. You need to be open.
Who wouldn't want a beloved animal companion to come back to them? And what would that look like?
I see the kitty several feet away from the door. He's not looking at me. His back is turned towards me. And I start to get this feeling. And it's this feeling of like my whole body is sort of vibrating, this energy in me. And then I start crying.
That's on this episode of Rover Says, the podcast where we talk about the weird and wonderful things animals say when they open up to pet psychics. I'm your host, Nancy Aziz.
Where did you get him? How did he come into your life? And what was he like?
Yeah, he was our first cat, so he had to really train us in on how to be cat parents because we didn't know.
That's animal communicator Kathy Von Gilder describing her special cat named Gabriel.
So we were shopping one day, at my husband and I and daughter when she was younger, at one of the local pet food stores, buying pet food, dog food, and we. My daughter and I went to the back of the store where they had all these rescue kitties. One of the local rescue organizations, I think, would rotate the cats in there, and so he was one of them. And he was this beautiful orange young tabby, about a year old, and we got at that time they allowed us to just take him out of the cage. It was kind of a closed room with glass and a door. And so we let him out, and he climbed immediately to the top of the cage. So you can imagine what kind of he loved. He was exploring. He wasn't afraid, and just walked around there. And then we held him, and we just fell in love, and decided to. Actually, no, we were going to think about it, and there was someone else walked in, and he was interested in this kitty, and then he started talking about, well, I have 10 cats, and one just died, so I want to replace it, and I just stepped right in front of him and said, no, we're taking him. So that's what happened.
Kathy and her family brought him home. His name was Heathcliff at the time. They changed his name to Gabriel, and he proceeded to change them. First off, teaching them cats are pretty ingenious.
And so he really broke us in, I would say, trying to learn about cats. One of the first things that happened on the first day was that we had a window cracked and no screen in it. It was late summer, I think it was actually early fall, and we had a little window cracked. It was probably an inch or two. We didn't realize that cats could actually get out of a window that little, but he could. We looked outside, and I remember looking outside at this big evergreen that we have just a few feet from our house, and I went, oh, there's a kitty under the tree, and that looks like our cat. Oh, it is our cat. But he wasn't running away. He just was laying under the tree, trying to tell us that, I'm fine outside. Don't worry. Which, of course, he was never an outside cat. But so we brought him back in, and yeah, he was. He did all sorts of things. He knocked over vases with water, and he loved the faucets, and he was very active and very interested in things. So we got broken in pretty quickly.
And so did the family dog.
So we brought Gabriel home. When we brought Gabriel home, we weren't sure how he was going to react to our dog. We had a yellow lab at the time. Her name was Kirby. And we just weren't sure. Kirby was about 13 at the time. And so an elderly dog and a young cat, we just didn't know how that was going to work. And there was a little bit of, should we say, antics going on in the very beginning because Kirby was older and she was kind and, wanted to allow this new being to come into our house. And Gabriel thought that maybe he could take advantage of her a little bit. And so there was a little bit of that going on. So we got really upset, and I got upset.
Kathy wasn't working as an animal communicator yet, but she had an interest in it and had been practicing with her own animals, so she had a conversation with Gabriel and Kirby.
But then when I tuned in and I asked the two of them what was happening, what they told me was, well, you haven't committed yet to keeping Gabriel fully, like in your body, like fully committed. I mean, we had, and he was right. I think we were still like holding out, like, is this going to be okay with Kirby? How's this going to go? And as soon as we switched our mindset and really said, okay, yes, he's staying, this can work. He was a different cat, and immediately they bonded, and they were such good friends. They would lay on the sofa together and snuggle. He would follow Kirby around. They were just really good friends, and that was a pretty incredible thing, I thought, from a 13-year-old dog and then a 1-year-old cat that was high energy and liked to get into things.
Do you remember any other times in your relationship that you had conversations with Gabriel that were pretty important in your relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Gabriel taught me how to call an animal back telepathically. So we would let him out, even though he was not an outdoor cat, and we wouldn't just let him out whenever all day long. Once in a while, because he really loved the outdoors, we would allow him to go in the backyard, and I would communicate with him and say, okay, you can't go past, these boundaries. I need you to stay within these boundaries because, you're not going to be safe otherwise. And so he actually learned that. And it was amazing. It was one of the first things I learned how powerful animal communication could be with just communicating with him with that. So he, every once in a while he'd wander a little further, and then I would call him back telepathically, and he came back within just a few minutes every time I would call him back telepathically. Wow. So, yeah.
Wow. So you weren't out there with a tin of food, shaking the tin of food, calling him. You were talking to him telepathically, telling him to come home. And he did. Yeah.
It was far more effective than trying to call him, with my voice or anything. I would stand on the deck, I remember, and I would, I think I would sit down on the deck. And I would, get in the place of connection, send heart energy to him and call him back and just say, come back. And he would every time. It was really, really, really amazing and helpful for me too, to learn.
Yes. And what was his boundary? Like, how far could he go?
Well, we have a little bit of a wooded yard in the back, and they kind of, the woods all joins, with the other properties around. And so it was just past, it was only to the point where we could see. So I would kind of paint this picture of, you can only go to the brown house, not to the brown house, which he did visit once in a while. I loved him there. And then around and over. And he stayed within those boundaries for the most part, which was pretty incredible.
A couple years after adopting Gabriel, Kirby passed away. She'd been with the family for 15 years, and it was a painful loss for all of them, including Gabriel.
Gabriel became the main source of comfort, and he didn't like that.
Oh.
It's not that he didn't want to do that, but what he said was that I don't want to be the only pet. I need another pet. I need another animal in the house. So he was really clear about that because he didn't want all that responsibility. And so he didn't want that. And so he actually requested that we get another dog. And when I asked him what kind of dog, he wanted a yellow lab, just like Kirby was.
Oh.
So, and we were not ones to argue. We loved that idea. So we ended up getting another yellow lab, rescuing one and he was 7 actually, and they also became really good friends.
Kathy says Gabriel was compassionate and loving and was especially fond of her daughter. He was a big part of the family for 17 years, and when he grew ill, Kathy was able to rely on her skills as an animal communicator to find out what Gabriel wanted to do.
Yeah, he was getting slower, and then he got diagnosed with kidney disease.
Oh.
So yeah, and he declined pretty quickly after that. But what I know about animals and what they've taught me is that, when they're ready to leave, they're just ready. They're ready, and he had done so much for us for so many years. He needed a break. He needed a rest. He needed to go back to heaven where the vibration is, much higher. And
Yeah.
yeah, so he ended up getting kidney disease. And then, yeah, he made it very clear to me. He told me it was time. And
It's wonderful that you could know that and have that conversation with him, because I think that's what's so hard for so many people. They just never really know what's the right time.
yeah, it's so true. And you can doubt yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's also difficult because if they're declining in health, because it's such small increments, it's hard to see it. So
Yeah.
when you're in the midst of it, it can be really difficult. And so, yeah, it can be helpful to know. And I've found over the years, if you tell them, I'm open, can you just make it really clear? They'll do that. They'll make it clear for you. As an animal communicator, I understand that animals come back sometimes. They'll come back as the same personality, same soul. But the thing that they're really clear about is that they don't want us to go search for them. The animals really want us to let go of that. And so I knew that if he was going to come back, I needed to just let go. So there was at least 2 times where Gabriel would come to me really clearly in a meditation, or just come back and come to my intuitive awareness and say, I'm coming back. I'm planning on coming back. I'm planning on coming back. And I knew enough to not attach to that and just go, okay, I allow that. That's amazing. I would love that. We would love that.
Much as Kathy missed Gabriel and wanted a cat in her life, she didn't go looking for another one. Then one day in her studio, Kathy is also a pet photographer, she asked to hold a client's cat.
And his name was Tux. And Tux was a very friendly cat and outgoing, and allowed people to totally hold him. So I did this really fun session with him, and studio session. And then his human was going to go out to the car and bring whatever she was going to bring out to the car. And she was just going to leave him there for a minute with me. And she asked, is that okay? I said, oh, of course. I said, can I pick him up? Oh, yeah. So I picked him up and I held him and I went, oh, I miss a cat. In a way that I hadn't thought about for 4 years.
Yeah.
In a way that was so conscious, and it was sort of like my heart and soul telling me it's time,
Yeah.
time. But again, I didn't attach to anything. I just moved on and said, yeah, I could tell that it was, I needed a cat. I wanted a cat. Cat. So that happened.
A few days later, Kathy and her husband were again buying food for the family dog at a local pet store, and a series of signs presented themselves that for Kathy could only mean Gabriel was coming back.
There's always kitties in this store. The rescue groups will there's a big giant cage they have near the counter, and there's always, not always, but there's very often a kitty in there to be adopted. So I walked into the store that day, and my husband went to go look for the dog food. I see the kitty several feet away from the door. He's not looking at me. His back is turned towards me. And I start to get this feeling. And it's this feeling of like my whole body is sort of vibrating, this energy in me. And then I start crying.
Wow.
And I'm not even near him, but I can see him. And I walk closer, and the feeling just gets stronger and stronger. And I start crying tears of joy. And then he turns around and I see him, and I'm kind of speechless. And I'm going, okay, what? I'm trying to process what my body is trying to tell me, right? My heart and my soul are trying to tell me, I'm going, what's happening here? And I was really exhausted. I think I'd been working a lot. And I just stood next to him and I felt better. Like I was refueled. Like my body didn't feel so exhausted. And I sat there looking at him and he had, he had the tears, he had a lot of tear stains on his eyes, and I wondered about that. And I just started asking questions for no reason for the person who was at the counter. I said, well, who's this cat and how long has he been here? And it's like I had no control over what I was asking.
Wow.
Coming out of my mouth. And what's going on with his eyes? And does he have allergies? And, all of that. And she's answering the questions the best she can. And then I say to her, for no reason at all, what's his name? And I thought, well, why am I asking that? Heathcliff. And if you remember, that's the name that Gabriel was given.
That's so crazy. Wow. What was your reaction to that?
That makes me cry. Oh, that was, I stood there speechless. I couldn't say anything for several seconds. And I think the woman at the counter thought it was odd talking. And then I finally got the words out and I said, do you know that the name of our kitty who crossed over the Rainbow Bridge about 4 years ago, his name when we adopted him was Heathcliff? And she couldn't believe it. She was in shock. Wow. And so, yeah. And I went, and I'm processing all of this and going, okay, what's happening here? So I'm thinking, okay, well, this is our cat, without a doubt. This is the universe speaking very loudly, and it's him speaking very loudly and clearly to him. And it wasn't like one of those moments where it can happen with people where you lock eyes and you're like, this is my cat. Yeah. That was not happening at all. But it was just the energy of it and what I was feeling in my body. And then the name, that completely confirmed it all. So we were, and I was asking things like, well, are people interested in him? What kind of cat is he? Yeah. And she said, oh my goodness, he's the best cat we've ever had here. His personality is amazing. He is friendly. He's social. He's mellow. He's incredible. And I said, well, aren't people inquiring? No one.
Wow.
And I said, has anyone, how long has he been here? About 2 weeks. They said, yeah, we're really surprised no one's inquiring.
Wow. Another sign.
Another sign, yeah.
All those signs, and then Kathy found out the rescue that had him up for adoption usually used foster homes for their adoptable cats, but this time had made an exception and brought Heathcliff into the store where Kathy could meet him.
That's how we had to find him.
Yes, this was destined to happen. And you were destined to take him home.
This is what I mean about when they reincarnate or when they come back. You don't need to look for them. You need to be open, I mean, I could have turned away and said, well, no, we're not getting him, which would have been very sad. But it was the signs were all there, and it was, very well orchestrated.
So Kathy and her family brought the cat named Heathcliff home. They'd later change his name to Cosmo. And Kathy noticed, while he had the same energy as Gabriel, his personality was very different.
So I was a little puzzled because oftentimes when an animal will come back, the same soul, it's the same personality. And so there's so many similar things, and that's how you know it's the same soul. But he wasn't the same. He was a very calm kitty and much more cuddly, a more cuddly cat, very cuddly. And so I knew it wasn't the same. He wasn't the same, but it was similar. So I communicated with both of them and I asked, what's going on here? And what I heard was that they were the same soul family, soul brothers, but different personalities. And then I heard that Gabriel needed to stay in heaven to continue to help us there. So he had double the help.
Wow. Have you ever experienced anything like that before?
No. No, with all the sessions I've done with people, and it's the same soul typically and the same personality will come back, but never this scenario that I've seen anyway. And so I was amazed by that and grateful beyond belief.
Kathy says by reincarnation, animals can continue on with one of their missions in life to help us on our own journeys.
One of the things that they get the most satisfaction out of life for them is to help their humans, particularly the pets that live with us. And that if our animal is going to come back and reincarnate, which they definitely do that, it's again to help continue that support that they've given us.
Even after they're gone, they're always helping.
They're helping after they're gone, and oftentimes they'll come back and help us and continue. It's sort of like continuing the help,
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. What a great story.
Thanks so much for listening to Rover Says. If you like the show, please rate it, review, and share with a friend. It helps other animal lovers find the show. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have a question, comment, or story idea, please send us an email at roversays@gmail.com. Till next time, keep talking with your animal friends.